Welcome back to the Menopause Movement Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Gordon. And if you're watching the replay or on YouTube, thanks so much for being a part of the Menopause Movement. Now, today on the podcast, we welcome Chef Cassandra Cotoia. Chef Cassandra is a professional chef. She's a health coach with 20 years of cooking experience. She graduated from the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park, New York in 2003 and spent the next 10 years cooking in various restaurants in the Northeast and the Hudson Valley. After climbing the ranks and becoming an executive chef, she realized that her passion was to work with clients one-on-one and decided to become a private chef for a family in Westchester County, New York. And that family was mine. So during the 6.5 years in that home, she worked very closely with local farms and refined her cooking style to include gluten-free, dairy-free, and other health-conscious options. Recently, she started her own business called Empowered Foodie, where she delivers custom weekly meals to busy families, as well as dinner parties and special occasions when requested. Chef Cassandra also coaches kids and adults to become chefs of their own kitchens. She lives in Cortland Manor, New York, with her husband, Jim, their dog, Roy, and their 2 cats, Minna and Merlin. And during the podcast, we discuss food and emotions, chefs, cooking, and eating for herself. The Menopause Movement Recipes for Living cookbook and our recipes membership, which Cassandra writes all the recipes for. Shifting gears from employment to starting her own business. Health coaching. How food connects families and is emotionally rewarding and memorable. Cassandra's relationship with anxiety. Choosing not to drink and the choices that she's made. Support for not drinking as a chef and where to find it. And how her choice to not drink has been an experiment rather than a punishment. Cultural beliefs around drinking. And at the end of the episode, make sure you visit drmichellegordon.com/podcasts, where you can find the show notes, plus the links to the books and resources mentioned in the episode. And if you enjoy the episode, make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you're always the first to know when each episode is released. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And thank you for all of the 5-star reviews. If you haven't left a review yet, please take the time to review the podcast. This helps more women to find it and get the help they need during the disruption of menopause. No one should have to go it alone. And thanks so much for being a part of the Menopause Movement. Now let's get to Chef Cassandra. Chef Cassandra, welcome to the Menopause Movement Podcast.
Hello. I'm so happy to be here.
So glad to have you here. So why don't you start just by telling us a little bit about yourself, what you do now, what you used to do, what you've been doing. Just give us a little history. So we have Chef Cassandra Cotoia here. And, as I said in the intro, she's been a chef for a long time. So let's just hear a little bit from you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So it's like 21 years now, I think this year, actually. I've been cooking professionally. I'm a graduate of the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park, New York.
So is that where Anthony Bourdain went?
Yes. Anthony Bourdain and the chef from Millennia as well. Like there's so many.
Oh, Grant?
Yes, Grant Achatz. So I went to the Culinary Institute of America. I actually grew up in the Hudson Valley. I was born in Vermont. My family moved to the Rhinebeck area when I was 4. And so I grew up around the culinary my whole life and loved to cook. And so when I was old enough, I decided to go to school. And then after school, I worked in a lot of restaurants. I became an executive chef of a restaurant. I worked in a bakery cafe. I worked up and down some different restaurants in the Northeast. And then again, came back to the Hudson Valley. And after getting it, becoming an executive chef, which was the pin, I reached that point and thought, this isn't exactly what I want to do. I want to have more one-on-one interaction with the people I'm cooking for. And so I was fortunate enough to become a private chef for you, Dr. Gordon.
Oh, for me?
Yeah.
Yes. No. How long did you work for us? 6 years?
6.5.
Oh, wait, who's counting?
But who's counting? So that was awesome because that opportunity came for me in the midst of a divorce. So it afforded me the ability to kind of change gears in a whole bunch of ways. And I was lucky enough to travel a little bit and change how I cooked to incorporate a lot more health conscious options, which was a lot more important. In restaurant that you're thinking about what tastes good and how to make the flavors stand out. With when I began working for you, it was nice because I got to really work with cooking healthier options that were sustainable for people.
Right. That's good. Yeah, that does help it was a bit of a transition to go from, cooking restaurant style to cooking health style. So let me just tell the story a little bit. So in 2013, I was looking for some healthier options to get my diet under control. And my belief at the time was that if I hired somebody to cook for us, that I would be able to have a much better control over my diet. And that was not necessarily, it was good to not have to cook or not have to shop and all of those things. But the biggest thing for me in terms of understanding how to get my body under control was really dealing with a lot of my own beliefs about food. More than having somebody prepare the meals for me or anything like that. It was really my beliefs about food that I had to just kind of push through, and my beliefs about exercise on top of that. There was, when you started working for us, I don't think I was exercising much at all.
No, you kind of started working with the trainer, and then you tried a couple of different, it's interesting because we talk about this all the time, but like emotions and food are so intimately linked. Right. And so like kind of figuring out the different layers of that and what feels good to you. And you tried several different things until you found something that worked for you too, that felt good for you, that you liked, how you like to eat and all of that. So,
well, and then we kind of got into, a little bit of a partnership because, you created all these recipes that were really very menopause friendly. So we threw them into a cookbook and into a recipes membership, right?
Yes.
And that's been because, you kind of watched me, what was it about 20? Yeah, I think I started going through menopause probably around 2012. So just before you started, but then it really hit me right after you started and I was complaining a lot. And we had to really do a lot of, tweaking to, the diet to get things
well,
going.
to make it flavorful and fun, as well as calorie conscious or health conscious, or, it was a challenge, but a really good challenge for me too, because even for me, I can only eat so much fancy food before I get over it, because I want something simple, which through the pandemic, I said this to you before, it's been really funny because, so for anyone who knows a chef, and if you don't know a chef, this is going to be funny for you, but we don't cook for ourselves. As a general rule, most of us do not cook for ourselves. We cook for everyone else. And we have one of the few professions that is an actual life skill. So we cook for other people, but we don't change, gears when we go home. Like we still have to eat. We still have to take care of ourselves. So for most chefs and most that I know, cooking for ourselves is like bottom of the list. Because when I'm home, I don't want to cook because I don't want to have anything else but my own food and just do something different. Right. But in the pandemic, and since I shifted gears, it was like, I had to really figure out what I like to eat, what feels good for my body, instead of just eating, up to this point, I would eat whatever was in the restaurant. I would make something from what was there, or, when I worked for you, what was available there. And so figuring out what you like to eat and what works for you and what works for your body is certainly an adventure.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's, I think that, we know in menopause that things don't work the same for all women. Now you're still in your 30s, you're not menopausal yet. But what we've discovered is that, if you eat the same way, and even if you exercise the same way, you're probably still going to get that menopause belly. And so we teamed up and created a cookbook. It's called the Menopause Movement Recipes for Living Cookbook, and you can get it off of my website, or you probably in Amazon. But then we decided to kind of take some of those recipes and put them together into a membership, so that women can, kind of support themselves. And we do it in a way so it's not so overwhelming. So it's 5 full meals per month. And then by the end of the year, you've got 60. And you can print them out. And, so there's going to be more information on that in the show notes. So let's just shift gears here a second and talk about what's important to you right now. You went through the pandemic. Before the pandemic, you made some decisions about how you wanted to live your life, and what prompted that. Let's go to that.
I've been so fortunate to have really great opportunities, and working for you. You became, it was like family for me, but also looking up to you as a strong strong woman role model. To me, it was, I watched you grow businesses and I watched you flourish. And I just thought, gosh, like, I don't know. I always knew I wanted to have my own business. I didn't really know if I'd have the courage to do it. And I think after watching you and like, we talked about different mindset shifts and things like that. And I grew as a person. I just reached a point where I was like, I just feel like, and I didn't, obviously the pandemic and the timing of that was not something I planned. I don't think any of us could have planned that. But it was, for me, it just got to, all of a sudden I got to a place where I was like, if I'm 30, at that time, 36 years old, if I'm going to do this, I should do it. And I should really try and step out and see what I, take all this knowledge that I have and do something with it. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of, I don't know, it just kind of came up to a place where I couldn't push it down. I couldn't, change it up. I had to try. And so I decided to leave and start my own business and try in the middle of the pandemic to figure out and I've been trying to figure out exactly what that's going to look like. And it's been a lot of fun. It's been really challenging, obviously up and down days, but that excitement around freedom and possible, all these different things that had kind of been swirling around in my mind of things I wanted seemed like that was like my next step.
All right. So you took you changed gears, you switched gears and you started working for people, working as a contractor or for creating meals, but you also are a health coach. How does that work?
So one of the things that was so awesome about working for you was I was able to get a nutrition certification from the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And that gave me a really large, broad background in a bunch of different health regimes and how to be a health coach. And I kind of thought that was going to be something I would do for a while. And what has happened most recently kind of combined different things to now be doing, like I almost call it like young chef coaching or foodie coaching, where I coach adults and kids on, teaching them how to become more comfortable in their kitchens and how to create meals, which is really, really cool.
I think we don't teach, we don't teach cooking anymore. It's just not a life skill that people get. And so somebody like you who, is patient with people as they make mistakes. It reminds me a lot. We've talked about this before, but in my surgical career, I got to a point where I could work with just about anybody and not be afraid of what they do because I knew I could fix it. Right. And so it's kind of like the same thing. We were talking about this the other day where, you're really good with kids, and a lot of parents, when they want to bake with their kids, it's really scary because baking is such a process. You have to follow everything exactly. And if the kid puts in a cup of baking soda, instead of a tablespoon, right? Most people wouldn't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
Whereas you can really shift gears quickly.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I don't have any kids of myself. And I, I've always been kind of like, I don't know if I really like, I don't know if I like kids.
Yeah.
And a client said to me, well, would you be willing to work with my kids? They're kind of difficult, but I really thought some one-on-one classes would be good for them because everybody is so bored, these kids have been home since, March.
Right.
So
like all of us.
Yeah. But it's funny, right? Because growing up, I would be home in the summers all the time and I wouldn't think anything of it. We didn't have all of the technology we have now. And my parents were busy working, so I didn't get to do stuff, but I certainly had never been home for this length of time. Because my friend was like, yeah, but think about how long they've really been home. They've been home. Anyway, so she said, would you be willing to try? And I kind of was like, yeah, I'll try anything. I'm open to anything. And I really love it. Like I really enjoy, the kids have grown so much in their ability to cut and focus. And they know, there's 3 children in the household and I've been working with 2, but the third one came in who wanted to kind of hang out in the kitchen one day. And so I said to the one I've been working with, okay, well, Lucas, explain to Ethan what we've been doing and explain why we're going to cut this way. And I watched him rattle off all this stuff that I had told him over the last 3 weeks. I'm like, oh, this is so cool. It's really fun.
But the thing is that, we have this thing in surgery and I don't know what it's like. I mean, I think actually surgery and cooking are not that far apart in terms of the way that, we have surgery has a really intense training period where there's a lot of shame and almost like a boot camp kind of atmosphere. And, cooking is the same thing. Kitchen Confidential brought that out.
Yes.
But we have this saying called see one, do one, teach one, right? Where, you watch one getting done, you do one, and then you teach one, and then that cements the process so you understand. And it's almost like you're intuitively doing that with these kids.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. I think it was very cool with me just saying, because I was like, let's see, because I wanted to see what this one had retained. Like, how much did he really remember? Like, let's see. And then I'm always blown away because I'm like, wow, they retain so much more than I do. Like when I listen to stuff.
Well, you think that, but then, we really do retain a lot more than you think. The brain is pretty powerful. The brain is pretty powerful, so we want to give our brains a lot of credit,
True. But it's very neat. It's very neat. And because it's something they get to eat after, like it's so part for me about working with the kids that I didn't expect to enjoy. Mm-hmm. It's because I'm in the house for a short period of time. The kids get really excited, and then I watch their parents get excited about what the kids are making. And so like it unites the family, even just for a short period, especially in the midst of so much chaos and so much upset. Like it brings in, like everybody forgets about it for a minute, and just gets to enjoy it.
So I love that. I love the ripple effect that you're talking about. There is a big ripple effect of cooking as a group. And I talk so as everybody knows, I have this program called the Minnow System, and we help women kind of rethink their menopause. And you're a part of that. You kind of teach a couple things in there. But one of the things we talk about in there, we see as women rethink their menopause, there's a big ripple effect, and their relationship with themselves is better. Their relationship with their families is better, right? And I talk a bit about how certain types of food remind me of my parents. So whenever I eat potato chips, I think about my dad, Yeah. And so it's like this. So I always have to, when I eat potato chips, when I choose to eat potato chips, and it's not very often, but when I do eat them, I eat a lot. I eat a lot. But when I do choose to eat them, I always have to kind of step back and be the observer and say, okay, well, what is this? Is it that I'm missing my dad who passed away in 2017? Or is it that I'm really enjoying the crunch? And so, I always want to be kind of cognizant of that. And then I have this really strong memory of my mother making brownies. And so, and it's like the visual is my mom and one of those square pans, mm-hmm. And these brownies and eating the corner. And so brownies, there's just this visceral memory with food, with my parents, potatoes for my dad. And it's just about anything potato, by the way. My dad, like I have a really strong memory of my dad slicing potatoes, putting salt on them, eating them raw, just, so wow. Potatoes and my dad and brownies and my mom. And it's funny because when you can gather people together, and so there is a point to this story. When you gather people together, there is a huge ripple effect of improved, when around food, maybe improved relationships or, a family cohesiveness or even just a memory that the kids and the parents get to have together where everything else kind of falls away. And that I think is so powerful, especially for someone, especially now in this time where we can't even spend time together that much, unless you're living in the same house.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's, the connection of food, like kind of uniting families, like, back, it wasn't that long ago that families would all sit together for dinner and eat, and all of that has gone, completely, for the most part, out the window. I mean, a lot of people, especially some of these homes, they were saying, they've told me before the pandemic, I mean, you're talking about they're up at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. The kids go to school, then they go to 3 different activities, and they don't get home till 9, right? So like, it's a very intense and much different world even than I grew up in. And so where is there time to sit down? Do you eat in the car? Do you eat on the way to a sporting event? Or, how are people connecting other than just on the weekends? And then the weekends are also busy. So I love that emotional aspect of food. I'm Italian, and my grandmother was, my first primary food memory is making meatballs with my grandmother. And, she was Italian, and she put a lot of parsley in, and she put, she like showed me, it was like garlic, parsley, and cheese. Like that was like what made every Italian dish good.
All the cheese.
So yeah, food connects to memory, like almost like music. You know how music takes you back to like a moment? I feel like same thing with food. Like food can take you back to like a moment that you remember.
Yeah. Or eat, just like, brownies with my mom every single time. Yeah. Or, the opposite side of it is, how we were rewarded as children, with ice cream or candy, and then how we decide to deal with that, as we become adults.
Well, how you're
whether we
nurtured,
decide.
right? You're born and you, breast milk is the first. So there's a lot of intricate connection around it, and the emotional aspect of food and why we eat and why we do certain behaviors around food. Like it all connects. But I like being able to kind of, I really am enjoying this other part with the kids, and I enjoy just in general, like being able to come in and help that one aspect, for the family if they're really busy or they just don't have time, whatever. I think it's a very cool thing.
That's really neat. So on your outline here, you talk about that you're almost 1 year alcohol free. So how did that come about?
Oh, the alcohol free. So, I definitely have alcoholism in my family. So it's always been something I've been more watchful of and aware of. I also am in the chefing world, which right, wrong, or indifferent tends to have a little bit of chaos. Yeah. It's a very intense, not unlike other professions, but just that's my experience. It's an intense profession where you work late hours, you're, slogging it out on the hotline of a restaurant, and then you get out at midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning and you go out and party because it's the only time you're available. And it's like a whole lifestyle that goes along with that. Sure. I never really, I kind of dabbled in that a tiny bit when I was in restaurants, but I never really got super into it. I've always been kind of conscious of my alcohol intake. And something funny started to happen. It didn't happen until, a couple of years ago, maybe a year before this. I started having a lot of anxiety after I would drink. So I would, go out to a nice dinner, have a couple glasses of wine, come home, wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, heart pounding, can't sleep, complete insomnia. I was lucky if I got 3 hours of sleep a night, then I wouldn't go back to sleep.
Well, I just, from a physiological standpoint, that's pretty normal, right? Because alcohol, while we think that it is a CNS depressant, but it also really, really messes with our sleep cycle. And so, what you're describing is pretty normal, even though it didn't feel it.
Right. Well, it had never happened to me before. It was new. Okay. It wasn't like I'd woken up. If that had started with the first time I had alcohol, I wouldn't have drank at all. It wouldn't have been a thing because I'd always slept well. So that was really new for me. I had also come off of my antidepressants. So which took me 3 years to come off of them. So I was just super sensitive, I think, to everything. And I think coming off of the antidepressants and then going, okay, starting to kind of lean on alcohol a little more because everything just felt much more intense. I've always been a really cerebral person. I've always been a really considering anxious person. I think about a lot of things. My brain is always going. The idea of suppressing that was always kind of nice. I don't want to deal with this crap. Let me just have some drink. Let me, do whatever. Let me just, watch TV or, it's hard to be in a world of distractions and not let yourself get distracted. So I started leaning on alcohol a little more, not ever in a way that I felt I needed to go to rehab, but just in a way of I feel like I'm not feeling good. I started losing my hair. And then I was like, oh no, I'm losing my hair. This is not good. I'm wired out. I can't. Something's got to give. And I had debated at that point on going back on my antidepressants. And I thought, look, it took you so long to come off of them. Last ditch effort. I've heard that alcohol is anxiety, is like gasoline and anxiety fire. It just makes it worse. Sure. So before I go back on my meds, let me take alcohol out as an experiment and let's see. I had seen some, at that point too, there were Facebook ads on this alcohol-free 1 year no beer is the site. And they were from the UK. They seemed really cool. I liked that they were from not the US. To me, that was kind of fun of an idea. I was like, oh, I get to listen to people, who are British all day. This is kind of cool. Yeah,
we like that accent, don't we?
Oh man, it's so fun.
It's so novel to us, but we say everything wrong to them.
Yeah, I'm sure. No, I understand. Yeah. So I said, okay, let me try. It was they had a 28-day challenge. I'm like, let me try this for 28 days. Let's see how this goes. And by a week or two in, I was like, okay, I'm definitely going for 90 days because they have at least at that point, they had a 28-day program, a 90-day program, and a 365-day program. And I said, I realized when I stopped drinking, I was like, oh, wow, I'm really leaning on this a lot more than I kind of thought I was. And I've established some patterns that I'm not happy with. I really liked the idea of having that community because it made it that for people who didn't necessarily have a clinical addiction, a place to go to say, I don't really like my relationship with alcohol. How do I change it without all the shame around you're an alcoholic, so you have to go to rehab and your life is, whatever. I really like they destigmatized it. They said, this is totally normal. Is it really normal to drink? Start questioning just kind of the belief systems that have been established.
Well, I think that's so important to look at the beliefs because, when you look at anything that comes out of Hollywood or, the media, right? What do people do when they have stress? They smoke and they drink. Two things that are really bad for you. And we know for a fact that these things are bad for us. Now, there may be some research that says, you can have a glass of red wine and that might decrease your blood pressure and that might prolong your life. But at the same time, one glass, very few people just has one glass.
That was never me.
And then there's, it's not me either. I still can't only have, when I decide to drink, I drink, 2-3 glasses of wine. That's just what it is, right? But I don't drink nearly as much as I used to. And I feel better. I find that if I do drink, I wake up and I feel like shit. So, it's easy. It's a lot easier to make that decision now because I've connected the feeling shitty to the drinking. But it took me a long time to get to that point. And so when it comes to, just even starting to look at anything like this, we have to examine all of the beliefs. And so we have to come at it with like this new view and say, okay, what is the issue here? And where is my social anxiety really coming from? And do I have a sense of not feeling good about myself to the point that I can't be sober in a group of people? Right. And yeah.
Right. And it's interesting. I'm very, very lucky. My husband is not a drinker at all. Like when I met him, he never drank. So, he was always like, he doesn't understand that whole thing. So it was kind of easier too, because I could come home and just say, I'm gonna make this decision, and he would also follow. And because if he had drank a lot, I don't know if I would have been able to continue. I don't know. It would have been a lot harder, I think, that way.
Sure.
But what I found so interesting was in this group, the fact that so many people are questioning, even if they have, because of course, everybody says, well, you weren't drinking that much. Why would you stop? And it's like, well, you don't see my daily alcohol consumption, but also it's not something just feeling off to me. And where popped into my mind just on my own was like, as a little kid, I remember like, the first drink I ever had is like, let's say as a teenager, I remember not liking. So where along the way did I train myself to like it? And if I had to work that hard, basically it took me until I was at the culinary taking my wines class, tasting literally 30 different types of wine a day. And when I started that class, I hated wine. But I said to myself, you have to like wine. You're a chef. If you're going to be a good chef, you have to like wine. So you better buck up and get over it and really start to enjoy it.
Don't you think there are chefs, though? Do you think there are chefs, though, that don't like wine?
I haven't met any. I haven't. There probably are. And if you think about it, there probably are. I don't know any, though. All the chefs that I know, it goes along with that's another belief system of if you're really good with food, you should be good at with food because they go together. They're connected in the fine dining scene. So if you're going to be as an established chef in a fine dining scene, you need to have a very broad knowledge of both, ideally. And so if you don't like wine, there's a feeling of like inadequacy there.
I see.
So
I don't know. So we went to this restaurant in Copenhagen. At the time, it was number 3 in the world. You were there. It's called Noma, Noma, and they had a wine and beer pairing with the meal, and it was a weird experience. The food was bizarre, and it was a fun experience, but it was strange. There was strange food. The dessert was chocolate covered moss. It was really bizarre. So we can say that, and it's okay.
Yes.
It was an experiential thing, but not only did they have a wine and beer pairing, they had a juice pairing. And so the challenge is that, is it really that you have to know wine, or is it because of the wine industry that it puts food with wine? Because can we look at pairing other things?
I 100%, so now I'm a year out, right? Almost. Yeah. It'll be a year and like a week and a half. Okay.
Woohoo.
So yeah.
Congratulations.
So thanks. It's interesting for me now because like I think I would love to see, and I feel like it's happening, more and more, this underground movement, which is becoming more known, of the sobriety movement, the not drinking movement. Like the generation after me, they don't even drink. Like their numbers for drinking are so far less. Like every generation, it's more. So it's interesting that even the younger people coming along are going, well, this is kind of stupid. Why am I doing it?
Who wants to poison themselves because of some culture from before? Right.
Well, and it's a cultural accepted belief system. So if you so there were a couple of things that were really intriguing to me. One was, I like the idea of putting it as an experiment because there was no stigma attached to it and it kind of was open-ended. And I liked also the idea of doing something outside of the cultural norm. So I've always been that person kind of anyway, where like I kind of look at everything and then form my own opinion, but I try to be really observant of what's going on. And like, I liked the idea of like being in a movement that was a little bit underground, but starting to do something different. Like I really liked kind of being a rebel a little bit that way. Like, oh, let me try something different and see where where it leads, and the benefits of it. Like you hear so many different alcohol. If you listen to any alcohol free, it's most of the interviews are pretty much the same. It's like, holy crap, I didn't realize how much it was taking out of my life. It was costing me financially. It was costing me energetically. It was costing me in my job, in my, relationships,
spiritual life.
And it doesn't have to be big ways. Like, oh, I'm in the, I'm penniless and I'm out on the street, which is kind of what everybody thinks. Like,
or like a hobo.
Yeah. It can be, all those little things are still like energetic currency that you're spending and you're not getting anything from. Right. So where I am a very spiritual person too, and I'm like, let me see what this is like. A year later, I can handle my thoughts so much better. My hair has grown back, which is really nice. Yeah. My anxiety is really significantly reduced to a much more manageable level. And I now have dealt with, living through a pandemic and not drinking, and starting a new business during a pandemic and not drinking allowed me to work through all of these emotions that had I had a substance at hand, I would have just suppressed. Right. They would have had to come out somewhere.
Right.
So I just feel a lot stronger in myself as a person.
I think there's an opportunity here to talk about emotions just for a minute, and the fact that what are emotions for, right? I mean, humans don't come with a user manual, and we're taught from a very young age to be factory workers, right? The way we're in school, right? So we start to come into ourselves a little bit, start to understand that we have choices, or that we can create our lives the way we want. And how do we look at these emotions? I mean, we're almost conditioned from the very beginning because of the way the media is, that stress is portrayed in the media, that when you feel a certain way, the thing to do is to reach for a substance.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. It's not to go out for a walk and control yourself, or to get, some personal mastery. It's to, it's amazing. I watched this, I can't remember the name of the series, but it's a series on Netflix about robots. It was from Russia. Robots that look like humans. And I'm telling you, man, these human people, every time something happened, they were pouring a drink and smoking. And I'm just thinking, these people are going to get esophageal cancer.
Right.
It's just like always pouring a drink. And you go back to the 50s and you look at commercials from the 50s. It's like, let's just push down our emotions. And what I don't understand is, why is it that we're not doing things to show people how to, interpret the emotions that we have? And that's
right. Well, and then even, okay, an emotion comes up, it feels uncomfortable, feeling, again, it's like being mindful, being present, and being aware of, it doesn't have to overtake me. I can then, what am I going to do with this emotion? Right. Am I going to look at it a little deeper? Where is it coming from? And like the minute that it comes up, and even for me now, going, having anxiety since I was really, really young, not knowing what it was, and then living my life for so long, feeling like I was like climbing uphill. If someone just sat down and said, okay, well, where is this emotion coming from? It's okay to feel it. First of all, being okay feeling it, like, right. It's okay. I'm angry. I'm upset. I'm whatever. It's all okay. Now what? It like lessens it immediately, instead of just something's coming up. I don't like it. I'm going to push it back. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And then when you're done doing whatever you're doing, it's still there.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, when I was drinking, it would push it away for a little while. And then it would come back at 2 a.m. and I wouldn't get any sleep because it was going to come out somewhere. And so yeah, I wish there was, I'm hoping kind of, my kind of hope for the alcohol-free movement is that as people are more aware, as people start to explore this more, that, how smoking first everyone did and then they just didn't. And now it's like such an abnormal thing when you see people smoking. It's like almost like strange. I'm kind of hopeful that is eventually where alcohol will be, where it'll be a little less.
I mean, you have to go back to prohibition. Remember, we know that alcohol is a poison. We know it's a toxin to the body. We also know that it makes us feel euphoria, or what we think is euphoria. It makes us feel, it gives us an altered state. And that altered state gives us a bit of a respite from our lives or from our emotions. What I like about emotions, the one thing that Michael Singer says in The Untethered Soul, is he talks about keeping your heart open and letting things pass through you. And he doesn't really tell you how. He just says, do it. And so I think our job in these situations is to be the observer, kind of step away from the actual thing, but observe the thing and let the thing pass through, whatever it is, and then we can decide what to do with it. And that's very easily said and much more difficultly done.
Yeah.
If you have hard to do
if you have shame and judgment around you're judging it, or then you add on all those layers, and it's like, so yeah, letting it pass through and not even giving it, just letting it go.
Right, because things at the end of the day, things are just things. They're neutral. Things are neutral, and it's when we start to apply meaning to those things that we start to suffer. That's the key, but it's so easy to understand like up here and so hard to like get down here and to put into practice. But it's a process, as it were.
Yeah.
It's
a process, and it's like a sticky trap. If you keep, if you keep ruminating on something, it gets.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's one thing I think that for me, when I choose not to drink, it's a little bit easier to control my thoughts, to just redirect. And
I find I'm just not as easily triggered. Like I see everything a lot more neutrally versus react like emotionally, like going to family events, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, unless you have a race, that's awesome. Yeah. But going to family, events and gatherings, for me was always very anxiety producing. Who's going to say this and what is connected to that? And so I would, the alcohol being present in those situations for me, I remember I would always leave and be super pissed off about something. And now I go and I'm just kind of observing and I'm kind of just detached, but enjoying people and just seeing how things work. And I'm not angry. I leave and I'm in a good mood. I didn't say anything stupid. I didn't do something stupid. I didn't do anything stupid. And it just is a much different, much nicer interaction. Like family, I also can do things like start to decide, okay, do I want to go if I have a family event, do I want to be there for 4 hours? Do I want to be there for 8 hours? And my best amount of time with family, in general is like 3 to 4 hours. That's a good time.
Yeah.
Go hang out.
I love that because, you can make the choice, and you don't have to worry, and then to not drink during that time. It's so I just think it's the best thing for us is to really kind of be aware. I mean, because once you step back from it, you can start to become more aware of your triggers.
Yeah,
and then just kind of things can kind of flow. So when you started your new business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're helping. What do you're doing the thing with the kids, but you're also cooking for people, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you ever get wine suggestions or questions from the people you're working for now?
Sometimes I do. If they're like, oh, I want to pair something with this, what would you suggest? And then I go into my giant book, or I go into I go online and I Google and I kind of come up with some kind of an idea. I haven't had to. So the one thing that I haven't had to do a lot is eat out without alcohol. That's the one thing. I think I still have a tiny bit of a question around going to a tasting menu, for example, and not having a glass of wine is a little strange.
Well, we did that, right? We went to Blanca. So Blanca is a restaurant in Brooklyn, and it's behind, what's the name of the pizza place?
Roberta's
Pizza, yeah. So it's a 2 Michelin star restaurant, And we went there, Cassandra and her husband, and it was a birthday celebration, I think, or something. I can't remember.
Yes.
It was my birthday.
Yours.
It was my birthday.
Yours. Yes.
Yeah, last year. And we said, okay, we're not going to drink. And none of us had any wine, but they brought us this really, really good alcohol-free wine.
That was delicious.
Yeah.
That was delicious.
And so I think that there's that option more and more as this alcohol-free world is coming to be. We're seeing more mixology with alcohol-free substances. We have some alcohol-free gin now in the house that we've made
so
some
good too. That's
I know.
Really good. It's really good.
We've made some
fun things. Like the sangria I made was really good with the alcohol-free wine.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So what if somebody wanted to work with you, like say to become a health coach, how would they go about that? What would that look like? Like
a foodie coach, like to teach them how to cook?
Or whatever?
Or a health coach. I mean, I can do either. Generally, I usually say, okay, well, I start with the basics, and I say, okay, well, what would be easiest for you? And it's usually a combination of like, I just want things that are quick to make, and I want to get more confident in my skill set so that I can throw things together. And then they, getting some recipes from me that are go-tos that I use quite often, so they have some fail safes. Mm-hmm. And so we just start breaking it down. For a lot of people, if they weren't, it's interesting. I had a grandmother that was an amazing cook. So in my mind, someone showed me something. But I've met several people who they have no food memories cooking at all because their mother didn't cook and their grandmother didn't cook. And not that it always has to be that stereotypical setup, but for them, or their fathers didn't cook, right? So, but that imprinted on them this idea that they couldn't because no one showed them. And it became very intimidating instead of just opening up to, okay, well, let me teach myself. It's kind of like me with makeup. No one ever taught. My mom was very anti-makeup. And so I grew up forever kind of winging it with the makeup scene, and I still do. And even to this day, I go, well, no one ever taught me. Well, obviously that's an excuse. I could learn at any time, but it's not something that's comfortable for me.
Thing called YouTube. Have you heard of it?
Yeah. No, I know.
There's like guys on YouTube who have amazing makeup skills.
I know. But it's interesting because that's my link to understanding kind of how they feel, because I have something like that too. I think we all kind of do. So it's kind of like I step in to affirm that let's start with the basics. Let's start with some easy things and get their confidence level up so that when I leave, they just go ahead and make, are able to, because they do still want to maybe feed their families a couple of days a week. I come in and I solve part of the problem or the part of the dilemma, right? So I solve the immediacy of needing some food in the house, but it's still really nice, that feeling of feeding your family. If you're still looking to do that, which a lot of people are, I kind of come in and nurture that a little bit. Okay, well, let's talk about how to use a knife. Let's talk about how to work with your oven, because every oven is different. And here's some really easy and quick ways that you can make a delicious meal in a short amount of time. And so we kind of break it down that way. And that's kind of what my focus has been now.
Do you work with people over Zoom? Have you ever tried to teach cooking or knife skills or anything like that?
I did a couple of cooking classes over Zoom. I haven't done a Zoom. It's so nice to do the one-on-ones when I can. I'm totally open to Zoom, but because it's so much easier to show someone how to cut, when I'm standing right next to them and I can correct their body posture. And not that I couldn't, I certainly would be open to it, but the interaction one-on-one is a little bit nicer.
That's for sure. Yeah. Well, but that kind of limits you. So, but you would be open. So if somebody who's watching this podcast right now decides that they want, some individual training.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So how does someone get a hold of you?
So I'm on Facebook under Cassandra Cotoia and as Empowered Foodie as well. I have a group for that. Probably one of the easiest ways to get a hold of me. I also have empoweredfoodie.com, which they can request in for.
Cool. Empowered Foodie, empoweredfoodie.com. Was there anything else you were hoping to share?
No, just that, I'm sure everybody had to get more acquainted with their kitchens throughout the pandemic. And I have heard several people say that they have been enjoying cooking, and they're making sourdough and they never did before. And so I'm kind of hoping it has fostered people to kind of think more about stepping more into their kitchens and cooking.
And their gardens, maybe.
And their
gardens. A lot of gardens during the pandemic. Yeah.
Yeah. Veggie gardens are amazing.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Chef Cassandra, thanks so much for coming on to the podcast today. I really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
If you want to, you can get the cookbook on Amazon, and we'll hook that up in the show notes. And we'll also hook up how you can get a hold of Chef Cassandra if you want to work with her one-on-one. All
Great.
right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now, if you have questions about the topics covered in this or any other podcast, I invite you to open a conversation with me via email at info@menopausemovement.com or on Facebook Messenger through my Facebook page at Dr. Michelle Gordon. That's DrMichellellegordon. I also want to invite you to join in our next beta group. Here at the Menopause Movement, we are always trying out new methods of teaching and the best ways to get on top of your menopause symptoms. We regularly run beta test groups where we create a learning experience valued at $2,000, but at no cost to you in exchange for feedback and testimonials. To get notified of our next beta group, simply sign up at beta.menopausemovement.com. And thanks so much for being a part of the Menopause Movement. I appreciate you.